Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Hopefully my voice holds out through the entire event. And we're really excited to have you all here. Talk a little bit about the format, and then I'll introduce our guests for tonight. So tonight we're going to talk about what it means to engage politically in the state of West Virginia and probably beyond. About what it means to have a conversation with somebody that you don't necessarily always agree with, that might be on the other side of the political aisle. I think it's part of the future of what we're going to be as a country, is how we're able to talk to each other moving forward. So we'll have about a 30-minute or so conversation among the three mics. And then we'll turn it to you all to ask questions. And then there may be some back and forth. I may take a question during the audience question time. But the idea is to get you all engaged, get your questions answered as well. And then when the event concludes, we'll go out into the hallway for a reception where you can visit with the candidates and each other and continue the conversation. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our candidates. To my left is Mike Caputo, Democratic West Virginia State Senator for the 13th District, and he previously served in the West Virginia House of Delegates. It says when you were born and inspired, but I won't say that. Mike was born in Reevesville, West Virginia. He attended Reevesville Elementary School and Reevesville High School. A career coal miner, retired as the District Vice President for the United Mine Workers of America. And then he represented the 50th District in the West Virginia House of Delegates for 24 years. He served as Majority Whip for 8 years until Republicans took the majority in 2014, and he then served as the Minority Whip. In 2020, after Senate Minority Leader Roman Prezioso announced his retirement, Mike ran to represent the 13th District of West Virginia, the West Virginia Senate. He's done that until this year when he's announcing his retirement and stepping aside, and we'll talk a little bit about what Mike's going to do next to change West Virginia for the better. So, Mike, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And to my right is Mike Oliveria, Republican, West Virginia State Senator for 13th District. He also previously served in the West Virginia House of Delegates. He was born in Fairmont, West Virginia. I won't say when you were born either. So, born in Fairmont, West Virginia, attended WVU and served in the United States Army, and is currently employed as a financial planner for Northwestern Mutual. Mike was first elected to public office as a Democrat representing the 44th House District in 1992. In 1984, he was elected to the 13th Senatorial District of West Virginia, re-elected in 1998, 2002, and 2006. And he served as the chairman of the Labor Committee and the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee. On February 1st, 2010, Oliveria announced his candidacy for West Virginia's first congressional district seat. He defeated 14th-term incumbent Alan Mollahan in the Democratic primary on May 11th, 2010, and then lost to David McKinley by an extremely narrow margin. Mike returned to the state Senate as a Republican in 2010, or right after 2010, or 2018, sorry. I should wear my glasses. But lost to incumbent Bob Beach, but then he ran again in 2022 for the open 13th district seat. And so now you're back serving, and we're happy here today. All right.
Thank you.
So I give a little bit of background about how you got to where you are, but I want to hear the story behind the story. How you got into politics, what motivated you to run that first time, and we'll start with Mike Caputo.
Well, hey everybody, and thank you, President, for hosting this event. This is probably my last political gig of my career, because I'm retiring at the end of this year, and I was kind of trying to get out of this one, but Mike just let me do that. So here we are today. But I'm looking forward to the interaction with you folks and to hear what's on your mind. I guess how I got into politics is really a crazy story. I was working in a coal mine and just raising kids, and had a pretty good life. I was feeling pretty good about what I was doing. In 1995, Senator Oliveria will remember this. When I say we, organized labor got really pissed off at the West Virginia legislature for passing a bill that was to reform workers' compensation for injured workers. And we were extremely unhappy about that. And the leadership of all the unions were trying to recruit people from our own ranks to run for office because we thought that we needed a voice in the legislature. And I was one of those folks that got recruited, and I didn't really think I had a chance of winning. But you know, I stepped up because I had some people that I believed in and supported my whole career asked me to do it, and I said, well, I'll give it a shot. I never was interested in the political realm at all. I mean, I always paid attention to who I voted for, paid attention why I voted for them, but I never ever wanted to run for office. I was a city councilman of Reedsville, Old Town Reedsville, for 2 years, and I did that because some guy bet me that I couldn't win. And when that 2 years was up, I quit and went on for, see, that was like 1981 or something. Then in 96, all this happened. And, you know, my first election, didn't have any money. We just had a lot of heart and a lot of people who wanted to see me win. And we only raised like $7,000 between both primary and general, which today, as anybody knows, you know, we wouldn't leave the house if that's all we could raise is $7,000. But I just had so many volunteers, and my union brothers and sisters wanted me to win so bad. I just couldn't let them down. And when the votes were all counted, Nick will remember this, I won by a landslide, 10 votes. 10 votes. And my opponent, who was president of the Marion County Chamber of Commerce, a good friend of mine, you know, it came down to us two in the Democratic primary. And he had called a recount. So it was a couple weeks after the election before the winner was declared, and I was finally declared the winner after that. So that's how I got into politics. And then after that, it just seemed like, I don't know, things just started falling into place for my campaign, and the people of Marion County just put their faith in me and sent me back 12 consecutive times to the House of Delegates, and then the 13th time I ran for the Senate, and they sent Marion and Montague County at that time. I guess I had enough trust in me to give me that Senate seat, but I always operated by, that's not my seat, that belongs to the people. And I'll respect whoever you want to send there. If you send me there, I'm totally honored, and I'll do the best I can for you, and I'll always respond. Constituent services, I think, is key to re-election. You got to return every phone call, you got to answer every piece of mail. When I got there, we didn't even have emails. You know, we were still receiving handwritten letters. We didn't have laptops. We didn't have anything. It was all just still handwritten stuff, and bill books were that thick. You were trying to find the bill you were voting on. But I had to learn the process really quickly because I had no knowledge of it whatsoever before I got there. I'll tell you the truth, I was scared to death. I really was. It was an experience, but you know, I just kind of tried to learn my way and found my way, and it just was an honor, quite frankly, to be trusted for that long by the people that sent me there. So that's my story.
Senator Oliveira?
I'm doing what I always wanted to do, a little different than Mike's situation. When I was 5 years old, my father had a meeting down at the state capitol. All of our area kids piled into the station wagon. We drove from Morgantown to Charleston before I-79 existed. And I think it took us 3 days. But we eventually got there, and the older folks in the room might remember the Daniel Boone Hotel. We stayed in the Daniel Boone Hotel. Dad had his meetings, and Mom took us kids over to the Capitol. And we went into the House of Delegates chamber. And I was 5 years old. I looked around, and I told my mother, I said, this is where I want to work. I told her I was 5 years old. This man came out and said he was the clerk. I had no idea what that meant. But he said, why don't you come over and sit down in this desk? So I sat in this desk, and he said, there's a very tall man that sits in this desk, and he's a delegate. His name's Rockefeller. He's part of the New York Rockefeller family, and this is his desk. So I sat at his desk. I thought that was pretty cool. And we left, and my mom said, you know, the famous quote, you can do anything you want to do if you're willing to work hard enough and smart enough. And I set out to serve in the House of Delegates. And In high school, I was in the model legislative session, and I got a seat on the House floor. 17 years old, got to be in the model legislature, and a man came out to my desk, and it was his desk that I was sitting in. And he had a little key, and he unlocked the door, pulled out something, and he was the delegate from Monongalia. He was an Italian man named Schifano. And he said, "Well, you really seem like you're enjoying this." I said, "Oh my God, this is the greatest day of my life. So excited to be here, always wanted to be here." He said, "Well, I tell you what," he said, "why don't you grow up a little bit, go to college, and about 10 years from now, you can run for one of these seats." I thought, all right. So I looked up at him and I said, "Okay." So that was 1981. They didn't have an election in 91, but I got elected in 92 and went to the House of Delegates. And I wanted to be there. I wanted to learn everything I could learn, wanted to contribute. But to be honest, I thought, you know, I just feel like I could do a better job than our state senators do. And so I set out right away to run for the Senate seat. And so in 94, I ran for the Senate seat. And it was a tough race. It was a very tough race. I was a kid still. He was a grown man. I always say he was a husband, a father, and a grandfather. And I was a guy living in an apartment in Star City. But we won that race. And people trusted me, and I worked hard. And 4 years later, I came up for re-election, and I looked around, and there were no candidates, the primary or the general. It was people said, "You're doing a good job, we should keep you there." And so I served 16 years in the Senate. I got to the point where when people would come up to me to say hello, during their first sentence, I knew what they were coming to tell me. But I would be respectful, and I would listen, and I would explain to them why they wanted to happen, couldn't happen, or whatever. But I was just becoming a little bit bored with the service. I needed to do something more. I needed to do something different. And so I ran for Congress. And again, I felt like our congressman was doing some things well, but not doing some other things well that needed to be done. I felt like our congressman held a very influential place in the United States Congress, but I didn't feel like the money was coming for our roads and projects, things that we needed here. So I ran against a 28-year incumbent congressman. His father had served 20 years before him. This was the third time I was running against incumbents. And the same group of friends that told me I couldn't do it the first time and the second time told me that I couldn't do it this time. But we won that race, and it was an incredible effort. I got into the general election of 2010, and the world changed in West Virginia and nationally. And what changed was a Supreme Court case called Citizens versus United. And it opened up an enormous amount of campaign funding that poured into small rural districts like our district and played a big part in my race. And as a congressional Democratic candidate, 2010 became the worst year for congressional Democratic candidates in 90 years. And there I was, Democratic congressional candidate. And I got 49.6% of the vote. So it was close, but it was a tough defeat. And I stepped back from it. I really believed in the end that God had a plan and God wanted me doing something else. And was really able to focus more as a father, help raise my kids more, be home more. I was worried about having to be away a lot in Washington if I had been elected. And with that time, got to coach my kids' teams and dance recitals and pageants and activities, and got to pick them up after school. And so in the end, I think I was a much better dad than I probably would have been had I been so far away. But when COVID hit, I wanted to get back into politics. So I ran in 2022. My first thing I thought I would do would run the senior center. Someone begged me to do that. So I was running a senior center as a board chair. We won the award for getting folks vaccinated and take home health issue stuff. We won some awards. We got some money from the governor's office and stuff. And I thought, well, I'll do something else. And I coached high school basketball for a year, and that was fun. but it was really missing politics, and that's what prompted me to run again in '22. And like Senator Caputo, I won that election in 2022 by a landslide. I think it's 153 votes in a district of 110,000 people. But it was enough, and went back to work and have thoroughly enjoyed being back in the Senate. It's an interesting perspective of having served as a 31-year-old in the state Senate and now serving as a 61-year-old. It's a different perspective, different place in your life. Now I'm the husband and the father and the homeowner instead of the guy in the apartment. And you just have a different set of eyes on those issues. So I've enjoyed it. One of the things I've enjoyed most is this opportunity to have Marion County in my district. I was born in Fairmont. My grandfather, 102 years ago, came to Marion County from Italy as a coal miner. Mike and I, we have that shared history, it's been wonderful to be able to give back to this area that really created the opportunities for my family decades and decades ago.
Great, thank you. I think it's interesting, both of you were called to do this for work in very different ways, but getting to know each of you over the last year, I think the common thread about the work you do is service back to the people of West Virginia. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, what motivates you to get up in the morning and get back to work each time. We'll start with Senator Allender this time.
You know, I really enjoy personal interaction with people. I always get a kick out of politicians who complain about events and activities. You know, we'll be out of session, so I say, oh, I gotta go to this, I gotta go to that. I'm like, well, don't go. I mean, if you take the job, do the job, you know? Because at each of those different functions, you're constantly learning. And you're learning about all different kinds of things. And the legislature really touches all aspects of our lives. I was on my probably second or third date with my wife, and she said something about, she said, you seem to have this enormous, knowledge base. I said, yeah, honey, I said, it's a mile wide, but in most places it's only an inch thick, and I say that because there's so many different areas that our lives touch as legislators, but then there are some of those where we really drill down and we get a real understanding of certain issues. And that's the fascinating part of this. I mean, in the course of the day, you could be on a healthcare issue, an education issue, an economic development issue, an environmental issue, an employment issue. So you're touching all these different areas. In fact, my wife jokes with me sometimes. She went to law school at WVU, and she's like, you have a very different legal education than I have. Hers was a textbook legal education. Mine has been a legal education of learning different chapters of the state code, one after another during the course of the day. So we have a lot of interaction with things because of that interaction. But I love serving people. We work together in the legislature. I notice Delegate Garcia is here from Marion County. I try to work with the area delegates from our counties that we represent. And I had the pleasure of serving with 3 Marion County senators during my service. My first 2 years, I served with Senator Joe Manchin, who was a state senator at the time. Then for 14 years, I served with Roman Precioso. Roman and I had a great relationship. We would talk a lot about the bills. We really made an effort, when we could, we made an effort to vote the same way on each bill, because we really felt like to do otherwise, we were canceling out Marion County and Montague County's voice. So we thought, can we both vote together on this bill? Is this a bill that we think is bad enough for our area that we both should vote no on it? And we tried to educate each other. The other thing we tried to do was there were 13 committees in the Senate, and we would take turns. One of us would take 7 committees, the other one would take 6. And so between us, we were on every committee. So when we would come to a community event like this, if you stood up and had a question about a bill, one of us was on the committee that was dealing with that bill. So that was really neat. And then when I returned to the Senate, Senator Caputo was there in his final 2 years, and we got a chance to serve together, and we have enjoyed working together. He's been good to point out to me projects in Marion County that have been important to the people and needed help because I was out of politics for 12 years. He's been good to point those things out, and we've been able to work together on a variety of projects.
Great. Senator Tatum?
Okay, I just want to begin by saying Mike and I do have a great working relationship. I've truly enjoyed the last 2 years serving with Mike, and his political career is so intriguing, and where he, how he got into politics versus how I got into politics. But, the one regret that I have is that I didn't run for state senate way before I did. Mike didn't want to hear that because I would have had to run against Senator Prezioso, who that's the reason I didn't run. I just didn't feel like I wanted to run against him as an incumbent. I thought about it one time. I even polled it and did very well in the poll, but then I just backed off at the last minute. I wish I could have served the people of Marion-Montague County in the Senate for 12 years rather than just 4 years or something. But that's water under the bridge, and life goes on. But I just think that it was kind of a calling for me, for lack of a better term. I was always, I don't have any higher education whatsoever. I went into the coal mine shortly out of high school, and I'm proud of that. I graduated from the School of Hard Knocks, as people say, and I just had a passion for people. I served on the grievance committee at the coal mine and handled grievances for people and stood up for, safety concerns and stood up to management when others just really didn't have the courage to do so, quite frankly. So I moved up through the ranks at my union and took a job with the International Union and retired as one of the international vice presidents from the mine workers. So it just always was about serving people for me. I just like to help people. Legislation comes and goes all the time, and we do battle. It seems like it might be a bloodbath on the floor. Yeah, that's good stuff, and we're setting policy. But I really like when someone calls me up with a state problem, and I can find a way to help them through that. That's always been the greatest feeling for me, when someone is hit a wall in state government and couldn't get anywhere, and needed some help through something. And as you're there a long time, Senator Olvera will attest to this, you meet more people and you make more connections in those agencies. And you can get a lot of things done that way. So for me, it's just always been passion, and that's what I talked about earlier, was constituent services. I always like to think it was maybe my good looks that got me elected for 13 straight elections, but the truth of the matter is I really believe it was my constituent services that got me re-elected every time, because I return every phone call, I answer every email, I talk to people on the streets, I attend every function that I'm invited to. And the hardest thing to do, if you've ever served in one of these positions, I know Delegate Garcia and Senator Olvera can attest to this, is to call someone up when you disagree with them. They may have left you a message that they want you to support A, B, or C, and you totally disagree with that. And you got to call them up and tell them why. And you expect an argument, or maybe they might be a little angry. But, I found that most people respected me for making that hard phone call and saying, look, I just can't be with you on this, and here's why. Some people like to avoid the hard phone. It's easy to call somebody up and say, yeah, I'm with you. Let's charge the deal. But when you're not with them, that makes it a little more difficult. But I've learned and become accustomed to doing that. And just saw it's the right thing to do. You elect someone, you call them, you want to know their position on something and why they have that position. I think we have an absolute obligation and a duty to return that phone call. And I've had people tell me, well, you know what, I think you're wrong and I totally disagree with you, but I respect you for calling me back, and you always have my vote. And that means the world to me, because maybe next time we will be on the same page. So it was quite a learning experience for me, believe me. I had to get directions to the state capitol when I got there, because I wasn't going to get it. Never a passion of mine, just kind of found my way there. So I had to learn the hard way. And I always said it took me 2 years to figure out where the bathroom was in that place. Let alone maneuver my way through legislation. But you know what? I spent most of my career on the very powerful Judiciary Committee. And I'd always pride myself with arguing with the attorneys on the committee and try to hold my own with those guys in the House, because that's where, everything happened on the Finance Committee or the Judiciary Committee. And most of my career in the House of Delegates, And then when I went to the Senate, I was fortunate enough to be put on the Judiciary Committee and served my entire 4 years on the Judiciary Committee. So it's a passion for people.
That's great. And you mentioned going to battle, right? I think what we see a lot of times, certainly in national politics, but also at the state level, is it feels like a war, right? It feels like Democrats or Republicans aren't supposed to talk to each other, aren't supposed to get along. You two can be in the same room with each other. You can talk to each other. You are friends. I think you describe yourselves that way. How does that happen in a world where I don't feel like that's rewarded politically?
Well, you got to have the will to do it. Mike and I aren't afraid to have a conversation and try to figure out where we need to be for an issue. And we don't vote alike all the time. I mean, there's a lot of times we part ways, but we have that discussion and it's civil. And we just move on and move to the next agenda item. And that's the way I was raised in the legislature. That's the way I wish the legislature was today. I don't think it's that way anymore. I kind of describe it as the junior high dance. If you go to a bar, the Republicans are on one side, and the Democrats are on the other side. Nobody wants to go ask the other person to dance. Everybody's scared to death. And it was never like that, but it's becoming more and more divisive and extreme on both sides, to be fair. On both sides, to be fair. And I just wish we would come more to the middle. That's one of the reasons I'm kind of ending my career, to be honest with you. I just feel like we're just not doing what we need to do and getting in the room and trying, the art of compromise, especially when you work for a labor union. You better learn how to compromise, because you're not going to get everything you want. If you have to negotiate a contract, you better learn how to compromise. If you have to settle a grievance, you better learn how to compromise. If not, you're going to be on the losing end of that almost every time. And I just feel like a lot of that has left the body that I serve in now. But when you have a super majority, as the Republicans have now, I get how that happens. I really do. There's only 10 Democrats in the House of Delegates and 90 Republicans. They really don't need to talk to Democrats and find compromise. They got 90 members. In the Senate, I'm one of 3 Democrats out of 34. They don't really need to talk to Democrats, but it was never like that with Mike. We always have the discussion. He's came to me with things he'd like to see in a bill that I'm working through the Judiciary Committee. The magistrate for Mon County was one. And I said, heck yeah, let's get to work on it. It's the right thing to do. And I had a great relationship with the chairman and went and worked that. And I went to things with Mike and committees that he served on. And we said, yeah, let's do it. And he's been able to find ways to do it. But, I don't know if Mike feels the same way I do, but I think super majorities are bad governing. I think it's a bad way to govern. I think you just lose sight of what our process was meant to be.
Senator O'Leary, anything to add?
The legislature changed a lot from when we were first elected to now. And a lot of those changes occurred while I was out. And what I mean by that is, when the legislature overnight reached a point where the Senate was 18-16, that triggers a lot of new issues. When it's 20-14 or 22-12, the partisan politics is not as strict. When it's 18-16, if that majority, whoever it be, Democrats or Republicans, wants to get anything done, they've got to hold on to every one of those 18 votes. And I think that makes for a difficult process. Most of the time that I served in the legislature from 1993 to 2011, I could probably count on both hands the number of partisan votes that occurred. And what I mean by that is the number of votes in which every Democrat voted one way and every Republican voted the other. It just really didn't occur that often. There were some folks maybe to the left of the Democrats, some on the far right of the Republicans, but there was this big group of people in the middle that really governed. And when they would drift over toward the Democratic idea, that would prevail, and they might drift over toward the Republican idea, and that would prevail. And then what eventually changed was these very close margins and, you know, obviously the majority party, albeit very small majority, trying to hold on. And then it just snowballed. You know, the Republican Party just picked up more and more seats. And one of the things that I sometimes mention is we have in West Virginia, and most states in the country have what's referred to as open meeting laws. Okay, where meetings have to be open. You have to be able to see what's going on, see what an elected official or even appointed official, what they said. And you have to be able to see the minutes from the meeting. And one of the exceptions that exists in open meetings law is political party caucuses. And they don't meet that requirement. So, you know, imagine yourself sitting in the legislature and somebody says, you know, we probably ought to have an exception for party caucuses where those Democrats ought to be able to get in that room and talk, kind of come up with a plan without, you know, the required transparency of an actual meeting. Same is true with the Republicans. But my guess is when legislators voted to give closed door, no transparency rules for party caucuses, they probably never envisioned that there would be 31 of the 34 members in one party. Probably never, no one probably ever really thought that. Well, what if everybody in the legislature was of one party and they could get in the room and close the door, you know? And so that is what has made this unique, a little bit different, obviously. And I think, you know, not violating any rules, they're not doing anything wrong, but it has created a different aspect of the process, because when you get 31 people out of 34 in the room and you make a decision to do something, the other 3 people really are spectators at best. They can stand up and make a little bit of noise. But the plan, speaking as a military person, that you have mustered the forces. And the only thing the 3 can do is they can create bluster. So it's muster versus bluster. And with the numbers of 31, you can do anything you want to do on the floor. So you can suspend the Senate rules, you can suspend the Constitution, you can do anything, because those thresholds that were built into the rules were high levels, thinking, gosh, you gotta have this many people to be able to suspend the constitutional rule. Well, all of a sudden you have that many people in that caucus. So it creates a unique situation. If it's used properly and effectively, maybe you can get some good things done. But it does, I think, create some questions for the public as to, hey, where's my senator? What are they really advocating for or against, and how's this process working? So it's a unique situation. And again, I'm not accusing anybody of wrongdoing. The rules are what they are, the law is what it is. But I often wonder if any one of us were sitting in the legislature when someone said that, if you ever in your mind thought 31 out of 34 would be of one party.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I've got one more question, then we'll let the audience ask some questions. I remember, I voted in my first presidential election in 1992. And I remember I was really excited to be voting in that election. When you look at surveys of people 18 to 25 now, they're not excited about politics. They're not excited to go vote for the first time. A lot of them don't want to get into politics, the stories you tell, or they don't want to get into public service. So I guess my question is, do you think there's something to be hopeful about? And what is that, right? Is there something you see that, there's a way to recapture some of that excitement and get people invested again? We'll start with Senator.
I like to tell young people in West Virginia the story of Senator Jennings Randolph. And some of you may know the story of Jennings Randolph. He was elected to the United States Senate, took office at the end of 1958. And as Vietnam War came and progressed, he really felt strongly that the national voting age of 21 should be lowered to 18. And his theory was, at the time, we had the draft. And so, 18, 19, 20-year-olds were being drafted into the military. Today, we have a volunteer system, but at the time, so it was a draft. And they weren't allowed to vote in our elections. And it was a West Virginia United States senator that spent about 40 years trying to change the law to allow 18-year-olds to vote. And I was telling the president earlier, one of his greatest disappointments in his life, in his later days, was that 18 and 19-year-olds had not gone to vote. And so the fact that the essence of an 18-year-old being able to vote was done because of West Virginia, I think West Virginia 18, 19, and 20-year-olds ought to vote at a higher percentage than any other 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in the country. It was one of our people that created that opportunity. And it was something that he faced enormous opposition getting that done. And so, I encourage people to vote. I was excited the first time I had an opportunity to vote. As young people, I hope you encourage friends, go vote together. A couple of things I did to try to encourage young people to vote. I passed legislation in the late 1990s that allowed grandparents, parents, and guardians to take children into the polling place, and all the way up until age 14. And the purpose of that legislation, in my mind, was that children often model the behavior of the people raising them. And so if at 2 years old, the child was in the little cradle going in, and they went in at 4, and they walked in at 6, and they walked in at 8, they walked in at 10, they walked in at 12, they walked in at 14, they had grown up in a culture of voting, and they had seen it with their own eyes. They weren't intimidated by it, they weren't afraid to go in that room, they weren't afraid of the ballot box or anything. And so I sponsored that legislation to try to get young people to be exposed to the process. If you're a parent or grandparent or guardian, I hope you'll take a child with you. That's the whole purpose. The other thing I did was, after the 2000 election, we were frustrated. Every election we were frustrated. So few people voted. We were trying to find that silver bullet. What could it be that could drive more people to come out and vote and more people to be engaged in civics? And so we passed the law to create early voting, and we tried to make it as simple as possible, create a window of time, give the county clerk and the county commissioners the opportunity to set some precinct locations. The goal was to set places that were easily accessible or handicapped accessible, where people could get in and get out. When they showed up, they could be given the ballot that they would otherwise receive at their precinct, their exact ballot. And we did that. And it really didn't help. It made it more convenient for people, but we really didn't drive up the number of people voting. So we'll leave it up to the next generation to maybe come up with some ideas to get more people to vote. But those were two of my efforts at trying to accomplish that.
Yeah, I think Mike explained it extremely well. And I mean, I grew up in a household where voting was a priority. My dad was a coal miner, and I remember him and mom sitting around talking about who they was going to vote for in the election as a little kid. And you just kind of grew up in that culture. Now, do they still have civics classes in high school? Do they still do that? I thought that was really interesting. If my aunts and uncles that worked in county government, so we was always interested in who was elected. I took my 4-year-old grandson to vote with me yesterday, and it was like, he just thought it was the coolest thing. I said, there's our friend BB, vote for her, and he pushed a button, and he was real excited. He went home and told everybody, I voted for the first time, and he's 4. And so, you gotta instill that in our youth, and you gotta make them excited about voting. It's because it is, when, if we get a 45 to 50% voter turnout, we're ready to do backflips through town. But if you think about it, that's pretty dismal. I mean, people in other countries wait in line for days to go vote if they have the opportunity to do that. Here in our country, we just, we let 50% of the people decide how, or 40% of the people decide how our government's going to be run for the next 2 or 4 years. And we just need to think about that. I think we need to encourage it as much as we can, particularly on college campuses. Dr. Davis, I think it's wonderful what you do and, bringing people together. And I hope that, this crowd will grow and you can go out and tell your co-students who, that you just got to get out and vote. You just got to make it a priority. It should be a priority. It's the future. Everything hinges upon whom you elect as the leaders, whether it's on a local, state, or federal level. And I think it's very, very important now. And I think, getting people involved is really a key to finding new leaders and finding people who want to run for these offices and encouraging others to vote. So, it's certainly, it's got to be aggressive, it's got to be constant, and it can't just be 2 months before the election. It's something we should be talking about year round. And I do warn a lot of young students who want to run for office, particularly political science majors. When I started, I had a full head of coal black hair and I was 6'5". I used to look like a lot of you guys don't. So this is what what happens to you. But it is as rewarding as anything I've ever done. And I do encourage you, and I like to joke about that, but I encourage you to, if you're even thinking about it, start out somewhere, whether it's student government or some club in the institution, or even the first step might be city council or something like that if you live in a small town. It's as rewarding as anything you'll ever do. It's as frustrating as anything you'll ever do. But at the end of the day, you look back and say, maybe I made a little bit of a difference. Maybe I helped someone along the way. But I agree with Mike on the early voting, man. I thought we hit the home run. When we passed early voting, I thought we hit the home run. This is going to increase voter turnout tremendously. And the only thing it really did was make it more convenient for those who want to vote. Those who are going to vote are going to vote if you have the election on a Sunday from midnight to 6 a.m., or you have it 2 weeks ahead of time, or you have it on a Tuesday. Those who are going to vote will vote, but it did not increase voter turnout. We were all saddened by that legislature. We really were. So. But just get involved, and we got to start somewhere.
Before we keep the audience questions, I'll use that as an opportunity to give a plug to, we have a new Civic Institute on campus, led by Dr. Samantha Godby, who's back there. So if you're in the room or you're watching this video later and are interested in getting involved, it's a great way to get involved. Sort of come and, we do voter registration tables. We do events like this, election watch parties, debate watch parties. So we're trying to, we talked about beforehand, the university is supposed to be the center of civic engagement for society. So we're trying to bring that back. And in that vein, we're going to turn to audience questions. Tiffany's got a microphone, so raise your hand and she'll bring the microphone to you.
So, Dr. Davis, as you said, our university should be the civic centers of our societies. Mike number one over here. Little Mike. You were talking about passing the early voting and it being a great thing. It makes it more convenient for those who are going to vote. And I was just looking to see if it would be logistical if, our polling stations able to be, for example, if we held a poll here on campus, if that would make it easier for college students to vote. So for me, I'm going home directly after this to go vote in the morning, to go early vote. And I live a couple hours away, so it's kind of out of the way, and I'm having to miss some classes for this. So do you think that it would ever be possible to bring those here to our institute so college students, it's easier for us to vote?
Well, if I remember correctly, and Mike can maybe help me out, I think the county clerk has a lot of flexibility.
Does he live outside the county?
What was that?
Yeah, about
Oh, are you talking about for you to vote? Even though you don't live in this county, is that what
Yeah, I don't live in Marion County. I'm originally from Nicholas County.
Okay, yeah, I don't know how, how you could work through that. That would be very, very difficult. I'm not saying that something could be done, but I thought you were saying, like, could you have an early voting a precinct here on campus for those who live in Marion County so they can vote here? If that was the question, then the answer to that is I believe the county clerk could have the flexibility to look and do something like that. But as far as from another county, I don't know how you could set up voting machines that would represent 55 counties in one location.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but, quickly thinking that would be,
Yeah, no, it was just a logistical question, if it could ever be,
and that would be great.
Yeah.
Now, you could vote absentee in your home county, and you simply request a ballot. They mail a ballot to you, you vote that ballot, you put it in an envelope, and then that envelope goes into another envelope. And on the outside envelope, this is very important, very important. The outside envelope has the markings of your name and information and everything. So you mail that back to Nicholas County, they receive it, they look at the outside envelope, have the information on there that they need. Then they tear that open and they take the inside envelope that has no markings on it, and they put it in the ballot box. And they are not allowed to open that envelope until there are 10 or more ballots in that box. And that protects the privacy of your ballot. I spoke to a high school civics class today. I have 2 more classes tomorrow. And what I found was, as I talked to the students and went through the whole process of how what I did was I talked about how we got to the election. So I went all the way back to the children being able to be taken into the polls and found that some of the students, their parents hadn't taken them in. I talked about the early voting. I talked about the 2018 legislation that Senator Caputo helped pass that created the single member delegate districts, how that has changed. I talked about the decennial census that occurred in 2020. I talked about the federal reapportionment that occurred in 2021. I talked about the legislative redistricting that took place in the fall of 2021. And I just kind of walked them through a series of dates and events that led up to, including nonpartisan judges, that led up to them going to vote now. And then I led up to it with the local activities, the things that the county clerk had to do, each of those steps of registering voters and all those things. And it was my experience today, they were very interested. They were curious, they didn't know much about any of this. I had some maps of the district, kind of able to show them where they live and how that causes them to be in this House district and that Senate district. I pointed one kid as the calculator. I said, he's the calculator. So I would go through and I would say, the decennial census, and I would ask him, what does the prefix of decennial mean? What does a decathlon, 10 events? What does a decade mean, 10 years? What do you suppose a decennial census is, 10 years? And I just went through everything, kind of laid it out for him. And I felt like that exposure was good. I encourage our civics professor to do the same. But I just don't think kids get much exposure in that area. And I think that's important.
Thank you.
And there were actually a couple kids in the class that were old enough to vote, and they were going to early vote.
I got to say, we have a lot of students come to the Capitol, and Mike always comes out on the floor, and he's giving them that talk that he just kind of touched on there, and I'm in the back. Like, I go to the back, I'm like, I'm so interested. I just want to hear it. I think there's a lot of things that I never realized or never learned throughout my career, but Mike does it so well with students. He's able to touch students, and usually you can tell when they're not listening, but when we get a group of students in the Senate chamber in the middle of the well, and Senator Oliver is talking to them, they seem very interested. So we got to keep doing it. Just got to keep doing it.
I've got a couple of senators that have nicknamed me Professor.
It's a two-part question that I kind of know the answer to already. Can a student at Fairmont State who only lives here for part of the year register to vote in Marion County, and why should they do that?
Of course, I mean, if you're a student, you're going to be here 9 months or more of the year. Of course, you can register to vote here, and you might feel like the decisions made by local city council members and local elected officials going to impact your life those 4 years. So I wouldn't see anything wrong at all with the student registering. There have been a couple of times where some students have been cautioned not to do it in some cases where they were receiving financial aid from other states, and they were wanting to make sure that everything was checked off to kind of maintain their residency in Pennsylvania or everything. So there were a few times where some students were said, hey, maybe you better not do that based on that particular grant program or something that you're involved with. But generally speaking, sure, I think they should get involved, register to vote. I think, I've seen some great campus voter registration drives in the past, and I think those are super. I mean, we used to have a lot of constraints with, had to be signed by a notary and all that kind of stuff. It was all a paper exercise, and all that's changed. I mean, it's just a lot easier to register to vote, and I think some voter registration drives on campus are a good way to get students involved.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you're going to spend 4 years of your life here, you want to think about it. A lot of decisions are going to be made in the 4 years you spend here at the institution.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for speaking to the campus tonight. I have a two-part question as well, but I don't know the answer.
We don't need it.
Senator Oswald, you mentioned earlier that Citizens United was a sort of a seismic shift for politics, and it had a significant impact on the complexion of politics in West Virginia. I think with that, something we've seen is a shift in the sense that West Virginia went from being a deep blue, if possibly somewhat purple state, to being a solid red state. So my question for you is, has West Virginia changed or have the parties changed? My second question, related to that, and relates to this issue of voter turnout, what impact do you think the perception that statewide races are no longer competitive, what impact do you think that is having on voter turnout?
Okay. The competitiveness of statewide races, all it really did was it just flipped. I mean, there were very competitive Democratic primaries for decades and decades in this state. And then that just in a period of a few elections just flipped, and all the competition then occurred in the Republican primary. We really didn't have a lot of competitive Democrat versus Republican races in a lot of seats. Sometimes you'd have it in governor, but really in your Board of Public Works, your statewide offices, when the Democrats had the voter registration numbers, it was very rare that someone would break through. I remember Khalif Benedict one year broke through as agriculture commissioner, things like that. I mean, it was pretty rare. So really what has simply changed is our competitive races are occurring in the Republican primary now, as opposed to having previously occurred in the Democratic primary. And as to whether or not the state has changed or the parties have changed, I think both have changed to some degree, but I think the parties have changed much greater. And I'd ask you this, and we don't need necessarily, let's just call it a blue party and a red party. Forget Democrat and Republican for a second with this analogy I want to offer. Let's just say that the blue party was in charge, and they looked at Florida and they said, you know what we should do down there? And the blue party was in charge in Washington and in Florida. You know what we should do down there? We should outlaw the growing of orange trees. We should outlaw the picking of oranges off the trees, and we should outlaw the sale of oranges. I don't know how long that leadership in that Florida state would stay the same color as the national. I think they would say, wait a minute, that's our biggest cash crop. That's who we identify with. That's how we fund our state. I think they might say, well, this doesn't make sense. And they might go the other direction. And I think in part that is some of what's happened here. I think our National Democratic Party has, in the way that they have handled fossil fuels, both coal, natural gas, I think that has caused a lot of folks in West Virginia to say, hey, that's not us. And so that's part of that change, I think. But I offer the Florida example to just give some perspective of a different thought.
I think Citizens United was the worst thing that ever could have happened to politics. When corporations and unions, quite frankly, to be fair, the unions just don't have the money the corporations have, but can spend unlimited funds for a candidate or an issue, whatever the case may be, and don't even have to report where it came from, who the donors were, and can take corporate profits and do that. They can brand a state, or brand a party, I should say. And I think that's exactly what happened in West Virginia. And my take on this is when President Obama won in 2008, they found a way to brand the Democratic Party in West Virginia to be perceived as all being anti-fossil fuel. They ran ads against me, who was a coal miner his whole life. That's all I've ever known. That's how I fed my family, that I wanted to outlaw coal mining in West Virginia. Now that's absurd, but when you have enough money and you can brand someone, or you tell someone the same lie over and over, sooner or later they're going to start believing it. And I think that was when the Democratic Party took it downhill slide in West Virginia. I remember some billboards being put up right after President Obama won, who I supported, by the way. I'm not ashamed of that at all. I think we could always work together and find common ground. It was called Faces of Coal. And they sucked a lot of Democrats into that too, to say like, this administration is going to outlaw coal mining, they're going to do away with your job, they're going to depress West Virginia, where in fact, I think it was a long-term plan to paint all Democrats to be perceived as that. That's just my take, and I may be wrong about that. It's just my take. And they chipped away. Now, because of those efforts, and it was a very masterful campaign. I mean, it sucks when you're on my side, but it was a masterful campaign. And now you see the majority have done a total flip. Look, I served 28 years in the legislature. I really don't know one person I served with, I can't think of one, that wasn't supportive of coal miners and what they've done for a living. Not one, Democrat or Republican. Some may have been a little more environmentally friendly than others, but I don't know if one wanted to put a coal miner out. Not one. I believe in being a coal miner sometimes. I face political headwinds for this. I think let's face the future. I think we have to find greener ways to burn our product. If we keep sticking our head in the sand and thinking that coal's always going to be king and coal's always going to come back, we're doing a disservice to our state. I'm doing a disservice to the members I represented, and I'm doing a disservice to the pensioners who rely on that pension check every month to come in. We've got to find cleaner, greener ways to burn our product, or we're going to be out of the job, and there's going to be nothing left in West Virginia. Now, we just had an announcement yesterday that the United Mine Works of America and a battery manufacturer called Sparks has teamed up, and they're coming to West Virginia. They're going to use dislocated coal miners. We're going to train those dislocated coal miners, and we're going to teach them how to build these batteries. And they're going to be good paying union jobs with benefits. Now, that's a just transition. I've been through, I started in the coal industry in 1977. I've seen the ups and downs of this industry. And usually what happens when we hit rock bottom and mines are doing bad and everybody's laid off, we get a bunch of federal retraining money. It comes down to West Virginia. Well, let me tell you what happens. We train a laid off coal miner to become a laid off welder because they're still in jobs. But if we bring this I think West Virginia could have been the battery hub of the East Coast. But I don't believe, and no offense to our friend Mike, that the leadership, particularly in the governor's office, had the political will to go after those jobs and bring them in because they would have been perceived as being anti-coal. Batteries don't make energy. they only store energy, right? You got to get your head out of the sand and bring these jobs. I see my friend from the building trades back there, Morgan. He knows that if we bring these battery plants to West Virginia, his members are going to be building these plants, and our members are going to be working at it. Your sons and daughters are going to be working at it. That's what we need to do. We need to get our head out of the sand. Coal's been very, very good to me. The union's been very, very good to me. But I'm also trying to look at the future. We haven't built a coal-fired power plant in 40 years. Let's face reality here. We're not going to build any more coal-fired power plants. It's not going to happen in this country. So we got to find a way to go to move forward with the and all of the above energy policy. I think coal will be a big part of that for a long, long time. I think we can maintain for a long, long time, but we got to get our heads out of the sand. And my members give me a lot of hell for taking that position because they paid my wages for a long, long time. But I can't be dishonest with you. I'm not going to sit here like some of the folks I serve with and stand on a mountaintop saying coal's going to come back someday. It's going to be stronger than ever. That's just reality of it. I just don't believe it's what happens. I might have went a little too far with that.
Yo in the back.
President Davis, Senators, first off, thank you for being here doing this. It feels that in a world where we have a hard time getting national candidates from across the aisle in the room together, we're doing it right here at Fairmont State. So great things are happening in Marion County, great things are happening in Fairmont State, so thank you both. I just have a question. Many young Americans feel that disagreements have become incredibly divisive. And this has led to personal attacks and isolation from those with differing views, especially when you're on one side versus the other. What message would you, Senators, convey to young voters who believe that disagreeing with someone implies that they're a bad person, rather than just having a difference of opinion? Thank you.
I'll start with that. And that's a great question because, I've never hid my support for candidates and right now my support for Kamala. I catch a lot of hell on my Facebook page and things like that. But I just always come back to the real simple message. I respect your opinion. Why can't you respect mine? I mean, that's what this country's all about. My dad fought in World War II. My uncles all fought in World War II. Folks fought in Vietnam and all across the seas to ensure us that's freedom. But if you disagree with someone, then you get combative about it. One of my best friends in high school, I think I was sharing with Dr. Davis earlier. I just posted a little thing about PEIA, and I thought that we didn't address it well enough in the legislature. And I wrote elections have consequences. And that's all I said. And I love her to death. We was best friends in high school. We're still best friends. She went from PEIA to Benghazi in two replies. God, get a grip here. We gotta respect each other. I don't care who you support. I really don't. I'm glad you're passionate. I'm glad you but you gotta give me the same courtesy. I mean, my goodness gracious. And I know family members who quit speaking over elections, or friends who quit speaking over elections. What have we become? I blame it all on 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week news and the talking heads. And back to if you hear something long enough over and over, you start believing it. If you listen to MSNBC, you believe that side. If you listen to Fox, you believe that side. And it's really, we got to remember, those aren't really news channels. They're entertainment channels. But we lose sight of that. And then, of course, if it's on Facebook, it must be true, right, Nick? I mean, it's got to be if it's on there. And so, it just inflames people. I just think to answer your question, we just got to get back to the days of respecting each other's position. Mike and I vote against each other, not against each other, but differently on the floor. I don't have any time, but several. And we still, at the end of the day, we have our conversation, respect each other. We might even laugh about it. That's what it's supposed to be.
We vote together about 90% of about 90% of the time. The 10% that we don't vote the same, we're in agreement. I agree he's wrong. So we're in agreement. Now,
I wondered how long it would take you to use that one.
yeah. To answer your question though, what I would recommend a young person do, I would recommend a young person go see the movie about Reagan that came out about a month ago. And in that movie, it highlights the relationship between Republican President Ronald Reagan and Democratic Speaker Tip O'Neill. And two men that, in a way, were both of Irish ancestry and had some things in common, but in another way, were two very different men. And that movie and a few vignettes of that movie really highlight that relationship that existed between them. And it would be nice for the next generation to maybe see that, because maybe what they saw was Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House, sitting behind Donald Trump while giving a State of the Union, and her tearing up copies of his speech. And if they were maybe to see that relationship that existed between Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, maybe they could see an example of maybe how it's supposed to be done.
Any other questions? Well, thank you to both of you for being here tonight and for a lifetime of service to the state of West Virginia. And I'll say personally, as somebody who's been here a little over a year, both of you have welcomed me to this community and to this state. And I honestly, I say this all the time, I think our best days are ahead of us. I think we have to start figuring out ways to talk to each other, ways to work across the aisle, way to not see everybody else as an enemy. And I think you all modeled that. Which is why we went to be as part of this series. So.
Well, thank you for having us. And also, I just want to say thank you for the leadership that you've demonstrated already. And I've told the President before, one of the benefits of serving a very long time in public office is you get an opportunity to work with people in the same role. You know, you get an opportunity to work with, in my case, 6 governors I've had an opportunity to serve with. 5 Fairmont State presidents, Dr. Dillman, Dr. Janet Dudley-Eschbach, Dale Bradley, Tom Kreppel, you know, and just getting to see people come through these roles and trying to be that stabilizing force. You know, Nick Fantasia's here, and Nick served as mayor a long time. We joked that, you know, people were going to come and go, we were going to be here forever. And so we had to get along. We had to figure out how to solve problems. And with each new person that came in, they brought new ideas. And his new idea right out of the gate was the middle college, which I think is a fabulous idea. And President Brian came to the Capitol, said, hey, we need a little bit of money to make this thing work. And we met with the Senate President and the Senate leadership and said, we're for this. And even at the dedication, our Senate President came up from Charleston to be here. And so we're going to be supportive. I want to be that stabilizing force that can be relied upon day in and day out, who can offer a perspective of the past, but hopefully a vision for the future. So I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you.
And I want to say thank you as well. I think the future of Fairmont State University is bright under your leadership and your leadership team. You are moving us forward, which is where we need to be. But most of all, I think our future is bright because of these young folks out here today. You guys came here because you're interested. Obviously, you thought of a million other things you'd probably rather be doing, but you came here because you're interested. That means a lot. You know, let's plant the seed and let's try to grow this interest in public service and politics in our state to make it a big part of this campus. Let's start something here that, you know, maybe campuses all across the state will want to want you to be the model for. And I think that's something we can do.
That's the goal. And I think it's something regardless of what side of the political aisle we can agree with. So.
So this is my signing die of my political career, right?
You might be able to find something for you to do.
I'm not running for mayor of Reedsville, but my wife said no.
All right, well, nobody leaves Fairmont State without some branded materials. So we've got some gifts for both of you. And then we invite everybody to join the senators and everybody else out in the lobby for reception. Thank you very much.